Hi, I'm Lisa Clark, for those of you who don't know me. I'm president of the Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council, and I'd like to welcome you to our 4th annual members meeting. We're thrilled to have such a turnout this morning and thrilled to be back at the Kellogg Center. We saw many of you at the gala not that long ago. So I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors for today. So first, at the gigawatt level, Consumers Energy, and at the megawatt level, please join me in thanking ClearResult, ITC, Next Energy, the Michigan Agency for Energy, and Invenergy. So thank you so much to all of our sponsors. I'd like to move on and thank our team at EIBC. These events are a lot of fun to work on with all of you. So first, Senior Advisor Dan Scripps in the back of the room, who's also the timekeeper, so if I go long, it's his fault. Nicole Forward and Stephen Wooden, who I think they're both stepped out of the room now. They were just in the room, so they're outside. But thank you. I want to give them a round of applause as well. None of this would happen without our board and all the work that they put in on behalf of the industry. So I want to thank the members of the EIBC board that are here today. And I'd like them all to stand up, if you don't mind. So I know we've got Jim over here. I saw Gregory. Let's see, who else I've seen from the board. Brian. Great. Look at our board members. Dave Simon, Bruce Goodman. Thank you so much for being here. We've got more board members coming and going over the course of the day, and for those of you that are here at the end of the day, I'm excited to introduce to you the new slate of EIBC board members as well. It's both an exciting time and a compelling time to be active in the advanced energy industry, and we've had a very exciting year since our last annual members meeting last spring at the same time. EIBC events continue to provide the industry with unique networking and business development opportunities and access to thought leaders and policymakers. We had a full house here in East Lansing for our annual gala and awards ceremony in November, where we listened to Jim Chen from Tesla. In early February, Michigan EIBC hosted the sold-out 3rd annual Michigan Energy Futures Conference, which brought together corporate energy purchasers with utilities, project developers, and regulators and policymakers to identify best practices, opportunities, and challenges for firms to procure renewable resources in Michigan. In March, we released a report with the Clean Energy Trust counting Michigan jobs in the advanced energy sector. That total was, at the strength of the industry, about 87,000. The largest segment of that was in advanced transportation. So for those of you that are interested, our Innovations in Transportation panel today will highlight a lot of those components, including our growing energy storage industry in Michigan. It's also an interesting report because it creates a foundation for future metrics. The report was built on Department of Energy and working with the National Bureau of Labor Statistics formation and done for the Midwest so that it's something that can be replicable and used as a benchmark. Michigan EIBC also remains active in policy discussions, as our members know. We work on the legislative side as well as regulatory side. We hold numerous lobby days, including a series of successful meetings yesterday, where we had a nice turnout of about 15 businesses, and I think we met with 15 or 16 lawmakers as well. We work actively and engage with those policymakers to turn recommendations that come from our policy committee into law. Our newsletter offers a weekly overview of the news in the advanced energy industry space and analysis on topics of interest, and that has grown to reach over 1,500 readers in Michigan and nationally. Our monthly policy calls have grown in participation as well, so this is an offering to any EIBC member to join us on our monthly policy calls, and the policy committee, of course, bubbles up our policy that then goes to our board for adoption, but those have also grown. And in the words of one of our members, I know if I join your monthly call that I'll be up to speed with the policy discussions. So we really appreciate that support from our member. Michigan EIBC works to be the authentic advanced energy business voice in Michigan. We understand the challenges facing our industry and the financial, regulatory, and market access challenges. We also work to create a business-friendly environment where businesses can succeed. Membership in the Michigan EIBC offers your company a seat at the table. I'm sure there's a lot of metrics you use to judge networking sessions and events that you participate in, but our favorite is really where business relationships that start at Michigan EIBC events turn into business opportunities and deals getting done, and that's what we're committed to. Finally, membership in the Michigan EIBC provides a lot of additional tangible benefits, including special invitations to member-only functions, features in our weekly e-newsletter that includes industry news and information and analysis, marketing opportunities for your business, and free or reduced tickets to Michigan EIBC events and opportunities to connect with companies across the country through Advanced Energy Economy, one of our national partners. We also work with Pew Charitable Trusts and others. In fact, last week we led a delegation to DC as well for a meeting with Secretary Moniz and members of Congress. The business of Michigan EIBC is to help your business grow. And last year, the interest from the industry really propelled our growth. Today, our membership is almost 100 Michigan businesses and rapidly growing, which creates a virtuous circle of adding additional capacity, additional networking opportunities, and additional influence. If you're interested in joining, of course, we have forms at the back of the table or on our registration table. We'll be happy to have you. Finally, before we start our opening session, I'd like to share with you a new initiative that we're excited to launch. Building on the foundation of a successful Corporate Purchasers Conference in February, we're excited to kick off our Corporate Purchasers Roundtable. Michigan EIBC will partner with leading companies seeking to procure renewable energy resources in Michigan to launch our Corporate Purchasers Roundtable. The CPR will exist, we have to give it an acronym because it makes life easier. The CPR will exist to inform Michigan businesses on opportunities to purchase renewable energy in Michigan, advocate for policies that allow for greater corporate renewable procurement, and connect companies with project developers and utilities offering renewable energy resources. So we're really excited to continue on the path that was started in our February conference and look forward to working with all of you on that. As a starting point, we're working with a group of industry leaders that include some of the folks that you all know. And we're hoping to also share that later today at the end of the day. I'm trying to tantalize those of you who can stay into staying throughout the day. So there's more coming up. And along that vein, we do have a great lineup for you today. It takes memberships and partnering organizations to really build the kind of panels and sessions that we have for you all today. And I'm really excited and really appreciate those that participate in these panels because it does take preparation to be ready to be here with you all and take your questions and have an active dialogue. So I very much appreciate the panelists and the speakers that we have here today. Now, I'd like to invite to the stage Patti Poppe of Consumers Energy and Sally Talberg from the Michigan Public Service Commission. As they make their way up here, I'm going to share an interesting fact about each of them. And they don't know that I'm going to do this. They don't look nervous. So, interesting fact about Patti is that she is from Jackson, Michigan, which I think is fascinating. And her father worked for Consumers, so very interesting. An interesting fact about Sally, I think many of you know that when she was a public sector consultant, she was very involved in the initial creation of Michigan Saves, which is one of the things that we worked on early together. And I think that Sally also has excellent taste in shoes. So I'm going to grab my mic and take my red shoes and go sit over here with them on the stage. So, thank you for being with me. 2016 is an exciting time to be the head of both of these bodies, Consumers Energy and the Michigan Public Service Commission. Our audience is very familiar with your organizations. However, I think it'd be interesting if each of you could start us off with a little bit of perspective on your vision of the future and your leadership role at those organizations. And maybe, Sally, you could go first.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to join this meeting today. And Liesl, congratulations on becoming president of Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council and Patti becoming the chief executive officer of CMS. Quite the accomplishments. It is an exciting time at the Public Service Commission. We're very busy, a lot happening at kind of the state level with cases before us and national and state policy discussions. And I'm honored to serve as the chairman of the commission. My vision is really inward focused at the commission right now, and it's to be the best public service commission in the country. I don't know if Jan Beecher is here. She can probably keep me honest in terms of how we measure that. But I think it comes down to being focused on the public that we serve and making well-informed decisions at all levels at the commission. that applies to the formal decisions that the Commission makes on rate cases and other matters, as well as the day-to-day decisions that our staff make. And it all ties back to our mission, which is to ensure safe, reliable energy and telecommunications services at reasonable cost. And we have an amazing team in place at the Commission, a lot of talent, and we just need to keep covering the basics, kind of the blocking and tackling. We have a diverse set of responsibilities, from inspecting natural gas pipelines for safety to reviewing utility investments, monitoring capacity supplies, and handling customer complaints. So all of that is just really critical and kind of getting back to the basics. But to be really successful going forward, there's just the need to have all these different activities at the Commission kind of come together. I don't think, given the challenges ahead in the energy field, that we can afford to be making decisions in silos. So issues like rate design, reviewing utility distribution investments in the electric grid, new generation proposals, even wholesale market design issues, all sort of need to be thought through and brought together for an integrated view, and really working as one team at the Commission. We're also seeing the need to collaborate with other partners, state agencies like the Michigan Agency for Energy, the DEQ, and the DNR, as well as stakeholders. This was, part of the impetus for the governor to create the Michigan Agency for Energy, in which the Commission is housed. We're kind of bringing together the different parts of state government dealing with energy. We're in the midst of major change in the electric industry. I don't know exactly what the future could or should look like, but I think there's the real potential to see a convergence of the automobile, the electric, the natural gas, and the communications industry, and that's pretty exciting. And I think it really fits with one of my major priorities at the Commission, which is to focus on modernizing our infrastructure. So I am fortunate in my role at the Commission that we have a governor who's laid out a strong energy policy to move Michigan forward. His objectives to improve reliability, affordability, and to protect the environment provide a foundation to kind of guide my decision-making at the Commission. I just want to give a couple examples of where the governor has set some specific goals or objectives: reducing how often and how long we experience power outages, ensuring we have adequate energy supplies at all times, eliminating energy waste, and shifting towards cleaner energy sources such as natural gas and renewables. So with that, I just kind of turn it over to Patti if you have additional thoughts.
Thank you, Chairman Talberg, and thank you everyone for being here today. It really is a pleasure to be here. Our company, Consumers Energy, is, I think, a different kind of company than we perhaps had traditionally been decades ago. And what we hope, and what my vision for our company is that people believe us. I know what what my coworkers are working on. I know what we're committed to, and it's very interesting. I spend, particularly in my new role, I'm spending time with our largest investors. And CMS Energy is seen as a premium utility because we're a pure play utility. That's what they call us. And they buy our stock and invest retirees, pension funds in our stock because they trust that we'll keep our promise. And we are absolutely trading at a premium to other utilities, not because our profits are higher, but because they're what we said they were going to be. And people ask me, what's your role as CEO of CMS Energy and Consumers Energy? And where I think we have an opportunity to dramatically improve is being able to earn that same premium from all of you in this room, from our partners here in Michigan, from our customers, to believe that we are in fact committed to the same things to which you're committed, and that's a growing, healthy, vibrant Michigan. We too, obviously along with the Commission, are charged with delivering safe, affordable, reliable, and clean energy. I think that is an incredibly challenging opportunity and a new and different opportunity than it has been in the past. We are at a pivot point in the electric industry that we are going to have choices that we haven't had before. And we have choices to figure out how to deliver that energy in a safe and affordable way that does move Michigan forward. And so when I work with my coworkers on designing our strategy and our vision for the future, it's clear that our options and our opportunities are so well aligned with the vision and the goals that the governor has outlined, that the legislature is charged with creating from a legal framework as we're discussing the new energy law. Our goals are so aligned for the long game. And my company has been around for 130 years, and we have the potential and the opportunity, if well managed and of the highest ethical and corporate citizenship standards, have the potential to be here another 130 years. And those next 130 years will be shaped by the next 5, there is no doubt. And so I'm very excited about leading the team that's going to partner with all of you, as well as many, many other stakeholders and all of our millions of customers across the state of Michigan to make the Great Lakes State great.
Thanks. That's a fascinating statement, that the next 100 years will be shaped by the next 5. I think it's really interesting. I was thinking last night about the long game versus the decisions that you need to make in the short term in order to enable that long game. And I really think that both of you represent thoughtful approaches to making those decisions. So one of the themes that I heard from both of you is change. And we know that there's a lot of change accelerating both in electric and natural gas industry today. How do you think about leading in a time of uncertainty? And as a leader, how do you harness that change and turn it into growth opportunities? Patti, I don't know if you want to go first.
I will be happy to go first. As we are considering the options for the industry, and as I'm looking at my own company's options, one of the principles that I like to stick to is to make decisions that leave the most doors open in the future, and stay very anchored in what the true outcome is that you seek. And so I'm just going to give you an example. Here's a simple example of what I mean by staying anchored on the outcome, but keeping your options open and considering a variety of alternatives. So my husband and I just built a new house. I live now 2 doors down from my father, who's the Consumers Energy retiree in Grass Lake, Michigan. And I did come full circle. That's crazy. But I live 2 doors down from my dad on this beautiful lake. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world, I believe. And my husband and I built this house, and we were committed to it being an Energy Star 3.0 home. And thanks to my partners and my energy efficiency team at Consumers Energy, we have a new construction program. I got no special deals, just so everybody knows. I was just part of the program. I'm a customer. I'm qualified. Okay, so just for the record. But so we were committed to this Energy Star 3.0 home. Now, I will say my husband's a slightly more of a zealot than I am, but we were into it. So we hired a HERS rater, and a shout out to Matt Rosendahl. I don't know if Matt's in the house. Okay, well, Matt did a great job for us from Great Lakes Home Performance. And he coached us and advised us all along the way. And we had a lot of options. We were building a custom home so we could do whatever we wanted. And he, in fact, our builder, who had never done an Energy Star 3.0 home, had to be trained. Our heating and cooling contractors had to be trained. They were trained in how to meet all of the standards. Now, my builder does a great job and standard caulks every joint, but we did the zip-R insulation on the outside of the house instead of the standard house wrap, and we did the tape. That was a big part of our commitment. We are 100% LED in the house. We have a great lighting control system. I will say there's some nice features of having a lighting control system. You walk in the door and I hit a welcome button, and all of my lights that light my path to my office come on so I can go back to work, which is what happens. But the outcome was that we wanted a very efficient, tight home that actually would save us money. Even though I reminded my husband he's paying me, but that's okay. Our blower door test, for all you wonks in the room, we had a 1.7 blower door test And the standard for Energy Star 3.0 is 4, and the building standard in Michigan is 7. And so 1.7 turns, even Matt was stunned at what a difference you could make when you made good strategic choices. And the incremental cost to achieve that was not at all what we anticipated that it would be, and we have a home that can last for generations. Not only is it energy efficient, but it's tight, and it will last, and it's well built. And so my point here, getting back to the original point, besides being able to brag about my Energy Star house, is that when you have an aspiration, you have to start with the end in mind. And what's our end in mind as we build out what this energy supply picture can look like for Michigan? And I believe our end in mind is the optimized, affordable, safe, and clean combination of resources. That starts with energy efficiency, followed quickly with peak shaving with demand response, and then clean sources of energy to fill in the gap for base load power to power some of our big industries. We have an opportunity to optimize in Michigan like we've never had before, but here's what's tricky about optimization. There's a lot of stakeholders. It's not simple. I'll tell you what's simple. Build a big baseload plant. That's simple. That's not what we're talking about at Consumers Energy. That's not what we're advocating inside and outside of our company. That's not what we're telling our investors we're going to do. It's a new dawn. And we have an opportunity to make a difference for the kind of energy that's provided in all resources. In fact, Terry Van Sumeren, many of you know, is now going to be reporting, we just announced this week, to our energy resources team, responsible for energy efficiency, renewables, and demand response programs, because we believe they all are forms of a resource of energy for the people of Michigan. And we're excited about it, and I hope you are too.
Great, thanks, Patty. Sally?
All right, so Matt also rated my home.
How'd we do, Sally?
I just
1.7?
I don't know. I'm not that wonky, but I do pay attention to how much I pay Consumers Energy on my natural gas bills, and I'm always delighted that it's not much. So,
Good. Energy's a great value. I'm happy to hear it.
even though I do like my gas fireplace to keep me cozy too. So, Liesl, you talked about uncertainty and change, and obviously the future is pretty unpredictable. And in the energy industry, I feel like the stakes are so significant for public safety, the economy, and the environment. This is where the governor's overarching goal of adaptability comes in, and this kind of relates to what Patty was talking, I think. Pursuing no regrets energy solutions that we can still move forward regardless of what the future holds, I think is the way to go. I mean, we just, and that's not easy to figure out. I mean, it's really trying to assess those risks, and we do need to still make decisions and move forward even in this time of uncertainty. I don't know whether the change, particularly with respect to distributed energy resources like solar and storage, are going to be subtle, or it's going to be more abrupt and disruptive. And you look at what Uber did to the taxi industry. How many of you have used Uber? And what enabled that? It was the smartphone technology. And so, obviously the energy industry is very complex. There's a lot of rules, and the telecom industry, I mean, they're all unique in their own right. But I think our energy future is going to be somewhat and potentially largely dependent on customer behavior. Liesl talked about a procurement group for large energy users focused on renewable energy, right? Clean energy. I have a quote, and I'm gonna ask you guys to guess who said this, but sometimes if you want to see change for the better, you have to take things into your own hands. Any guesses? I can give you a hint.
Can I phone a friend? I'll take the hint.
Frederick Douglass, Clint Eastwood, or Elon Musk?
Elon Musk.
No, it was Clint Eastwood. It was a trick question.
Oh man, Sally keeping us on our toes this morning.
All right, so, and you think about it, sometimes if you want to see a change for the better, you have to take things in your own hands. And we're seeing some evidence of that, where customers, whether it's residential, commercial, and even investors are paving a path to access cleaner energy resources. And, it's not just about whether the lights turn on. So the example, with Switch, and maybe Patti can talk a little bit more about that, one of the customers that they've attracted to their service area and what their expectations were with respect to clean energy. Just some statistics. As of 2015, there was 24 gigawatts of solar in the U.S. That's still relatively modest. But there were 6,400 megawatts added in 2015, and that was a 37% increase over the prior year. About half of that was customer-owned. Storage is also a potential game changer if the costs can come down. One report suggests that installed prices expected to be completed in 2017 will cost about a third of the cost of those in 2015. Now, adoption of these technologies in Michigan has still been relatively modest compared to other areas of the country and is still largely dependent on public policies. But I don't think we should rest on our laurels. I mean, at the Commission, it's important to ensure that we're thinking not only about the regulatory model now and making that sustainable, but for the future and how we can best adapt that. I also think, as Patti talked about with Terry Van Summer moving over into that group, I mean, utility planning is going to be different in the future. Doing load forecasting even, it's not necessarily just what customers are drawing from the system. And so I think this is a formidable task, and that applies to utilities, the Commission, and policymakers.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. And I do think that you also raised that point of supply and demand and how enabling customers that they are taking on because of the technology that's available to them shifts when customers are demanding and how they're demanding. So it's interesting how both sides of those equations are evolving. So yeah, so and as you referenced, as both of you referenced, utility business models and regulations are definitely changing. These shifting load growth, aging infrastructure, certainly generation and distribution, including with these technology advancements, are really changing lots of the ways that we use energy, and with an increased customer emphasis in all these rate classes, which I know, Patti, is something that you've spent a lot of time and energy on. Recent reports of coal plant closures also put it into kind of startling relief, and this statistic was interesting to me. Consumers in the past 10 years has dropped its coal use from 41% to 24%, and I thought that was pretty startling to see that number set up that way. Another example of change. I'm curious, what's the biggest change in the industry that you've seen during your career? And Sally, I don't know if you want to take that one first.
Well, that's an interesting question. I was visiting Henry Ford Museum recently with my family, and I was struck by the fact that many of the energy technologies that are in that museum are still being used today. The steam turbines, the conductor, even the light bulbs. We're almost 100% LED, but we still have a few of what my husband calls freedom bulbs, which are the incandescent bulbs. We're going to try and sell them, make a big profit. So on the one hand, we're seeing all this change, and it can be really profound, but yet some of the basics of the system are like what they've been for almost 100 years. And I was moving my office to, we're hopefully going to get a new commissioner one of these days and doing some shuffling of offices. And
Do you want to tell us anything about
no,
that? No. Worth a try.
And
Can't blame a girl for trying.
came across a National Geographic article, and it talked about solar photovoltaics. It could have been written today or in 2011, but it was from 1981, as if it was on the cusp of this major change. And so while there's a lot of change, it's also, it just sometimes feels like the wheels are churning quite slow too. So I don't want to date myself, but when I think about change that has been noticeable, it's more on kind of the social side of things and less about the technology itself. And that relates to the sentiment around energy waste reduction. About 20 years ago, there was a view, it certainly wasn't universal, but many policymakers and regulators thought that energy efficiency programs run by utilities were not cost effective and they should be eliminated. And part of this was driven by the shift in the industry to move towards more retail competition, with the thought that those energy, that market would sort of unlock these energy services and they could be provided through the marketplace. Or the concern was if you saddled the utility with the responsibility to provide them, they wouldn't be able to compete. That has really changed. Now you hear fairly broad bipartisan support among policymakers, utility CEOs, businesses, and others touting the benefits of energy waste reduction. About half of the states in the United States have utility energy efficiency programs in place. Energy waste reduction is also a core part of the governor's energy strategy. He referred to it, I think it was in the 2013 timeframe, one of his first energy messages, as the best example of no regrets energy policy. It's a win for the environment, it's a win for reliability, and it's a win for affordability. So I do need to give a shameless plug for the Governor's Energy Excellence Awards. Nominations are due May 20th, and if you have questions or thoughts, see Todd O'Grady or Mary Templeton, who are here for Michigan Saves today. Sorry.
Thanks. And Patti, I'm curious, you've had an interesting career and has certainly, you've been in some really interesting places. So I'm very curious how you're going to answer the question of what's the biggest change you've seen in the industry.
It was very hard to narrow it down, I must confess. So I actually, I did a little homework on what we believed to be true when we passed the 2008 energy law. So some of this might be surprising. It was surprising to me. We negotiated the 2008 energy law in the 2006-07 timeframe. It was enacted in 2008. In January of 2006, the Capacity Needs Forum report came out. And I just reread it. Here's what it predicted. Many of you may remember. It predicted that we would we would start to experience shortages in Michigan by 2009. That by 2011, we needed 2 new baseload coal-fueled power plants. It specifically called for coal-fueled power plants because load growth would be growing at 2% per year for the next 20 years, and natural gas was running out. If you'll remember, we were building LNG import terminals in Louisiana. Then we passed the law. And then the greatest economic crisis we've experienced in our lives occurred. Natural gas was discovered to be abundant, and now those terminals are turned into export terminals. We actually have realized a minus 1% annual load growth during that time period, which lines up with our energy efficiency programs. We had what I would describe as the perfect storm to put us into a mindset of false certainty about our supply picture for Michigan. But what it does do, we didn't build those plants. We have only built renewable energy. The energy law created the energy efficiency industry in Michigan, which has been extraordinary. And I think we have found, I remember when I heard somebody say, well, and unfortunately it was not that long ago, a particular politician, to be left unnamed, said, cancel all those energy efficiency programs, especially that natural gas one. And I remember saying, what are you talking about? This is the best thing that we can offer to our customers. And some of the traditional utility people, were a little surprised by that answer. And so we did a little more homework and can prove and justify that it isn't hocus pocus. Some people think it's hocus pocus. It's not hocus pocus. We actually confirm where those savings are coming from. And our future, right now, we are on the cusp of determining what is the framework by which we want to make go-forward energy decisions for Michigan. And I think it truly cannot be understated, the significance of the decisions that are going to be made in the negotiations for the current energy law under discussion today. Now, one thing I want to just be clear completely. The profitability of my company does not hinge on anything in the energy law or the energy law getting passed. What does hinge on it is Michigan's competitiveness, Michigan's ability to attract new and different businesses. And I'll just talk about Switch for a minute. So we recruited, Consumers Energy has gotten very engaged in economic development and as a means of growth. I don't need to nickel and dime my existing customers to grow my company. I need to add companies. I need to grow the pie in Michigan by attracting people to come here, do business here, bring their families here, bring their employees here. That is the best ticket for growth for my company. And that means our energy portfolio has to be competitive. And what I mean by competitive is it's not just price. It is price. And when Switch came to us, here's what they told us. That's the new data center that's going up in Grand Rapids in the old pyramid. They're bringing new life to the pyramid. I suppose I shouldn't call it old. But it was empty, and they're locating their data center in that pyramid. And so Switch came to us, and they could locate in any state east of the Mississippi. They could go anywhere. And we worked with them. We recruited them. We brought them to Grand Rapids during Art Fair, which was very smart of us. They really liked it. They fell in love with Grand Rapids. And so but here's what they said. Our prices were competitive. Our prices are competitive. They could go any state east of the Mississippi. Our prices are competitive and our reliability is secure. They need 100% reliability and they want 100% renewable. And they knew we could partner with them to make that happen. That is not the traditional customer of old. We're trying to attract and recruit companies that have a variety of needs. Aruco, Stick Die-Castle. We've attracted these big companies to come and locate their businesses in Michigan, and each of them had a different value proposition. We need flexible energy policy that prepares for a clean, efficient, optimized model of delivering energy in the variety of forms that a variety of customers are going to need. And it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. So back to my original point about we need options that keep doors open. We need a framework that's flexible and adaptable as conditions change. Everything we believed to be true when we passed the 2008 energy law ultimately was not true. But fortunately, our energy efficiency programs and our renewable commitment of that law was a no-regret strategy. No harm done. They've been great. They've done great things for Michigan, not just harm. They've done great things for Michigan and the people and the businesses when they're going through an economic crisis to be able to reduce the amount of their capital spent on energy means they could maybe just get their business to stay open through that crisis. We have an opportunity to pass a law in Michigan that can make a difference, that has the integrated resource planning mechanism that not just guarantees the lights are on, but guarantees we have the power portfolio that attracts companies, businesses, families to come to Michigan, thrive, and grow.
Great, thank you. And Patti, one of the things I'm hearing from you is this conversation about what the customer's asking for. And I know that that's something that you were involved with before your upcoming transition, but that's something you've always been interested in. It seems like the expansion of the business interest is something that you're very keen on as well, that I'm hearing more from you about that. So it's an interesting change in the industry. So on top of all that change, we've all referenced some of the changes to the business and regulatory models and what's necessary in order to shape that utility of the future. There's efforts underway in many different states as well, states on the coast and also closer to home, including Minnesota. Some of those efforts bring together a range of stakeholders along the lines that you were talking about, Patti, and also, Sally, your mention of the collaborative nature of the Public Service Commission. So bringing stakeholders together for discussions to encompass how to use integrated resource planning, to adopt framework for vision of the future, improving customer service offerings, and more. What's your take on these changes to the business and regulatory model, and how do you envision that shifting? You've talked a bit about how you don't need the legislation necessarily, but it's interesting how the regulatory piece fits into the business piece, and that's something that the members of the advanced energy community are very interested in as well. So I don't know, Patti, if you want to take that first.
You bet. And so to be clear, I don't need the energy law for my profitability, but Michigan needs it to be competitive. So don't tell anybody I said I wasn't for the law. I'm definitely for getting the law passed because I think Michigan needs it. I want to be clear about my motives for being so passionate. about bringing that into this conversation here. But as the regulatory and legal constructs are formed and continue to grow, again, I just suggest that the more cooperation and collaboration and openness about possibilities that we can be, the better we will succeed. Because I think the point I'm making about all of these things not being true that we predicted before the 2008 energy law is that we can't predict the future. We're not good at it. We try, everyone has their perfect models, and we all have it down to the 4 decimal places of exactly what's going to happen, and most of the times we're wrong because some unforeseen innovation occurs. And so when I think about one of the most important things that we can be doing moving forward is confirming that we've got an adaptable plan that allows for the infrastructure investments that can maximize our optionality in the future. And then I'll just say on the grid modernization front, which I think is going to be a critical element of enabling these distributed resources and a different set of customer offerings, I think of the grid of the future in relative terms. The grid of today is like I-80 going through Iowa. Anyone ever take that road? Like it's like straight, you're going one way, people get on and people get off at very, regular intervals. Now, I think that's how our electric grid is today. We've got central power generating stations, we ship the power out, it gets off, a little bit comes in from some other peak load sources on a hot day, but it's pretty much one way and it's straight. The grid of the future is going to look a lot more like downtown Chicago, where you've got multiple modes of transportation come in multiple different directions, different scope and scale. You got a train and a pedestrian all in the same neighborhood. And I think our grid investments of the future need to be, again, flexible and adaptable. There's some no regrets we can do with digital SCADA and some cap bank controllers, some basics that we can implement that, again, are no regrets, that leave us optionality for the future, but that all of our decisions need to be made in that long-term lens of what kind of environment are we trying to create in Michigan. And let's make it bright. Let's make it attractive. We can compete. I'm telling you, part of the story of me coming home back to consumers after being all over the world and living a lot of different places is Michigan is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I can tell you our humility and our sometimes self-esteem serves us negatively. We should be proud of Michigan and what we have to offer, and that we can attract and compete to get anyone, anytime, anywhere to come and be here with us and grow their business and their families. And I think energy is a critical part of an enabling infrastructure that brings and attracts people to come to us. And Consumers Energy and my coworkers there are very excited about partnering with anyone and everyone to make sure that we grow Michigan.
I like how Patti uses the transportation analogy, given her background with General Motors. So that was great, and I haven't heard that before. I guess just we need to be proactive about this. And I'm not saying this has to be figured out tomorrow or even this year, but I think that it's going to serve us if we really start thinking through some of these issues now before the world around us changes. And we've seen in some states where there's been a lot of political upheaval and things get pretty tense when there's competing interests at stake. And so I think now is the time to start thinking through some of these issues. And I think there's 3 areas that need attention. One relates to getting the pricing right. And there's debates at the legislature about how best to do that. But I think that's really critical going forward so that we have a sustainable model. And that applies from rate design to issues with standby rates to how people get compensated for distributed energy resources. I think just across the board, that's an area that needs attention. 2, I think the role of the utility and thinking through that with the future where they're not just maybe selling kilowatt hours. And so working through those and the rules, I think the pricing and the rules around the role of the utility were developed in a time where the market and the technology was different. And it's really not suited for the future, at least a sustainable, kind of model going forward. The third issue is to really define the goals for the grid. And this is a little bit what Patti was talking about, whether that's resiliency, reliability, interconnection of new technology, kind of figuring out what those goals are, how to best maintain the system and enhance it to meet those goals, and then also work through, how the value is appropriately allocated to different customers given their different usage. So those are all complicated, but I think really important things to tackle going forward.
I appreciate that. I think that's a great summary. We don't have a lot more time, but I feel like you both opened up so many things that I'd love to sit here and talk for 3 more hours about, which we can't do because I know Sally's got a meeting, so totally respect that. But I do want to say, Sally, you just raised some interesting points about integrating pricing, role of the utility, and goals for the grid, and then looping back to your answer from the first question, which was when you were talking about being the best public service commission that you can be, and collaborating within the Public Service Commission as well as without. I think that that's something that you certainly have really pushed for, and I think that's a great thing. I also heard Patti make a lot of comments about collaboration. So before we wrap it up, I'm going to ask you both if you could talk a little bit about collaborating, because for the members of EIBC, it's a couple of different things. One is certainly collaborating when it comes to partnering at the Michigan Public Service Commission and having those conversations, but it's also about market access. And so how can members of EIBC continue to be active collaborators with the utilities in Michigan's energy future? So, these are companies that are interested in being part of that energy future, and in a lot of ways, there's roles that are already created and opportunities, but I'm just curious about how do you both see that collaboration going forward? So I don't know who wants to take that first.
I can go. I think our framework after the implementation or the passage of the 2008 energy law and our implementation of our energy efficiency programs across the state is a great blueprint. I think many of you can acknowledge that it was through those working groups and those collaboratives that partnerships were formed, new business ventures were created. We've created a whole new market access and frankly have implemented a new industry in Michigan all centered around energy efficiency. And that has not, I feel like it's been a very positive experience for many of the participants. I know it's been great for Consumers Energy. And so I think sometimes those working collaboratives, though they can be a little messy and sometimes, who's the leader of this group and who's got authority here and all those questions come up. But the bottom line is if we can get great ideas on the table and be open to partnering to bring them to life, and again, staying anchored in the end game, what are we trying to achieve here? I think there's a place for a lot of people to come to the table and for Michigan to innovate and lead.
Thanks.
And I would I agree. One observation, I've been on the commission for 3 years, and there have been really maybe 1 or 2 contested issues dealing with energy efficiency. And I think that's been largely because there's been a process in place where stakeholders, utilities, the commission staff can work through a lot of the technical and even underlying policy questions with implementation. The commission is a regulatory body. We make decisions, typically through a contested case process. It's very cumbersome. It's very costly. It is, I think of it as like issues get put in these little boxes. And so we're thinking these great thoughts, but the reality of how the commission functions is it's hard to work through these issues through that format. And we have to constrain our decisions based on what's in the record. And so that's where, we're the regulatory body, but we can also, work with others in state government, such as the Michigan Agency for Energy, on some of this policy work as well. So I think there's a number of avenues to kind of bring about the collaboration, and the commission certainly is a partner in that, and our staff have tremendous experience and technical skills that they can bring to the table and analytical. So, I mean, that's how I see it kind of playing out in the future.
Great, I appreciate that. Well, I think that we've come to the end of our time, and so I just want to say thank you, Patti, thank you, Sally. Really appreciate you joining me here today. I learned a lot from listening to you and talking with you, and I hope our audience did too. So thanks for your time.